Welcome back to another session of Game Plan. Today, just a reminder of why we've called Game Plan Game Plan. It's actually a sports analogy, and the idea is that if you took football as a sport, if you looked at all the different teams, they all play the same sport with a different strategy. And Game Plan is essentially our strategy at Festival of how we want to engage with the gospel and how we encourage people and how we view stuff. So we're not saying our game plan is the only game plan, but we do say that we have a game plan and want to encourage people to be part of how we view things. And game plan is just a helpful introduction to how we view things. So if you look on the screen, we started off with session 1, which just looked at the who's who of Festival. Session 2 was what is Festival? We called it it's part of our one pager, which kind of like just looks at our definition and some key thoughts around who we are as Festival Collective. Last week, you would have looked at the gospel was really a salvation story. If you remember, sort of the left hand and the right hand, one was what is the gospel story, and this other hand was kind of like the commitment to that. And today we are looking at our view on the Holy Spirit. So if we ask the question, who is the Holy Spirit? Many people are a bit nervous of the Holy Spirit. They're kind of like, well, the Holy Spirit often seems as like sort of secondary or thirdary, if there's such a word, in terms of the understanding of who God is. That God the Father is easy, people get that. Jesus, God, Son, get that. God, the Holy Spirit, yeah, not too sure about that. But it's really important to understand that the Holy Spirit is part of the Trinity and he's a person. It's not this weird, mystical, mythical force. The Holy Spirit is a person. The Holy Spirit can be grieved. The Holy Spirit can speak. And we need to recognize that the Holy Spirit is God. So there are many different ways of trying to describe the Holy Spirit. So there's the top left there, which is like the clover, a 3-leaf clover. So 3 parts, but one, and that's probably not helpful because God is one, not 3 parts. So that analogy falls short. The sun could be seen as trying to describe the Trinity. The sun brings light, the sun brings warmth, the sun brings energy to help things grow. An egg. So the egg is 3 parts, yet it's one, as the shell, the yolk, and the white stuff. I think it's albumin, if I remember correctly. Water is another analogy of trying to describe the Trinity, because it's the same thing, but in different forms. Look at a person. So I am a father, I am a friend, and I'm a son. So I'm 3 different people, 2 different. Once again, it doesn't work well. A fidget spinner maybe is another way. Like 3 persons, they are unique, but one God. But I think this is really helpful. So what is the Trinity? There's certainly only one God and Creator, the God of Israel. And there's the whole verses. The Father is God, the Son is God, the Holy Spirit is God. All those key verses there. The Father is eternal, Son is eternal, Holy Spirit is eternal. The Father is not the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is not the Son is not the Father. There are 3 distinct persons. And yeah, someone once said, if you try to make sense of this, you're going to go mad and you'll lose your mind. But if you don't accept it, you'll lose your soul. So we have to, this is one of the mysteries of our faith that we have. We believe that God is one, yet at the same time, there are 3 distinct people in that oneness, and it's very difficult to comprehend. There's lots of theology around this, and if you want to get into all the nitty-gritty, have a conversation with me and I can send you some details and some really good literature and some good teaching. But it is a complicated conversation. But what I get to the point where I just go, it's a mystery. Sometimes, there's a Deuteronomy 20:29, the secret things belong to the Lord. But what God has revealed, that's what we are accountable for. So we understand this. but it's not always that easy. So the Holy Spirit is part of the Trinity. What is the work of the Holy Spirit? I love this verse in John 18. It says, but in fact, it is best for you that I go away. This is Jesus talking. Because if I don't, the advocate won't come. So what is the advocate? Now, there's a Greek word called paraclete. And really it means someone who comes alongside. And they really struggled in translating. So some versions will say advocate, some versions will say comforter, someone who comes alongside, someone who comes to help, someone who comes to support, someone who comes to, who's on your team no matter what. That's who the Holy Spirit is. So if Jesus didn't go, the Holy Spirit couldn't come. If I don't go away, then I will send him to you. And when he comes, he will convict the world of its sin and of God's righteousness and of the coming judgment. So one of the key aspects of the Holy Spirit is to convict the world of its sin. So here's the great thing. When we're sharing the gospel, that's God's job, or the Holy Spirit's job is to convict the world of sin. And I love that, to convict us of God's righteousness. Basically going, you're better than this. Often we call it our conscience, but really we have to listen to the voice of the Holy Spirit when we know we're doing something wrong and we go, you know what, actually I'm better than this. And God's saying, you know what, you are better than this. So a Pentecostal take on spiritual gifts. So we will fall in, I'll describe just now what is a Pentecostal, what is our view. But there's this poem, and you might not be able to read it, but I'll read it for you. It says, it was 6 men of Indostan, to learning much inclined, who went to see the elephant, though all of them were blind, that each by observation might satisfy his mind. The first approached the elephant, and happening to fall against his broad and sturdy side, at once began to bawl, God bless me, but the elephant is very like a wall. The second, feeling of the tusk, cried, Ho! What we have here so very round and smooth and sharp, 'tis me is mighty clear, this wonder of an elephant is very like a spear. The third approached the animal, and happened to take the squirming trunk within his hands. Thus boldly up and spake, I see, quoth he, the elephant is very like a snake. The fourth reached out his eager hand, and felt about the knee. What most this wondrous beast is like is mighty plain, quoth he. 'Tis clear enough, the elephant is very like a tree. The fifth, who chanced to touch the ear, said, even the blindest man can tell what this resembles most. Deny the fact who can, this marvel of an elephant is very like a fan. The sixth no sooner had begun about the beast to grope, than seizing on the swinging tail that fell within his scope. I see, quoth he, the elephant is very like a rope. And so these men of Indostan disputed loud and long, each in his own opinion exceeding stiff and strong, though each was partly in the right, and all were in the wrong. It's a great poem. It really does help us understand that there are different views of the Holy Spirit, and we have to go this. As a Pentecostal group, we have a particular belief around the Holy Spirit, and one day when we get to heaven, we'll realize that each of us are a little bit in the right, but each of us also could be in the wrong. So it's the same as like, right now I'm standing in the church at 4:30 on Sunday afternoon. Now, in South Africa, it's 5:30. In Australia, it's probably 7 hours. So say so it's 9 o'clock at 9:30 at night. If I phone someone in Australia, or it could be depending where you phone them in Australia, but someone in Perth, so 7 hours ahead. What's the time now? 9:30. No, it's 4:30. No, it's 9:30. No, it's not. And you can have this massive debate and argument, but both are right and actually both wrong. So this is just a helpful analogy to help us that this is what we hold to, but we also hold it with open hands, saying, God, if we need to change, we will, as we learn more and study more and grow. But generally speaking, this is what we hold to. So we talk, number one is this thing called the baptism of the Holy Spirit. What is the baptism of the Holy Spirit? We believe that there are two realities. There's a salvation moment. I think Ephesians talks about that. When we become Christians, we have the deposit of the Spirit inside of us. But also there's we call it the second moment. This is what makes us who we are. We have a second moment, which we call the baptism of the Holy Spirit, where God empowers us for mission. And that comes out of Acts 1:8. You'll receive power when the Holy Spirit comes upon you to be witnesses. Acts chapter 2, the day of Pentecost. They all gathered together, tongues of fire, wind, crazy stuff. Everyone starts to speak different languages. And that's how we would define the start of what we understood as Pentecostalism. So we're part of a group of churches or a group around the world that hold to this idea that when we become Christians, we have a deposit of the Spirit inside us. That's our salvation experience. But then there is a second moment where we go, something happens, there's a shift. And we believe that when we receive that, that's a baptism in the Holy Spirit. And yeah, God changes us. So why do I need this baptism? To be empowered. So receive the Holy Spirit, and then you'll see that there's this thing called spiritual gifts. Now, if you've been in church around, you'll most likely have done a spiritual gifts test. And a lot of the challenges of those spiritual gift tests is that they lump all the gifts together. So if you see on the screen, it says not every spiritual gift is a gift of the Holy Spirit. Why? That's confusing. So let me run through this. Now, if you are from a country which sees any pork product as bad, you can't touch it, you will say pig. It's just pig. If you have bacon, it's pig. If you have a suede jacket, it's pig. But because we're British or we like pork, we look at that. I mean, we have multiple words. We have the picnic, we have the ham, we have the hocks, we have the belly, the ribs, the backbone. We have suede leather. We have created so many words. In the UK, I think there's over, when it comes to the rain or precipitation, it's over 100 words to describe it because it happens a lot here. You go to the desert, anything that falls from the sky has one word. So you can see as something is of higher value, so we place more and more words on it. So when it comes to the gifts of God, there are different words for it. So, and actually it comes down to the Greek. Now, I don't know if anyone can read Greek. I can't. Maybe if Mam is watching this, he'll probably be able to read that for us, if he reads any Greek. But really, if you read through the Bible, there's these three passages, the three main passages which talk about different gifts. The first one is in Romans 12. And the word that we've got the Greek descriptor of the word, which the English have translated into Greek. And the Romans 12s are the gifts that God the Father gives us at birth. So it talks about the gifts of leadership, the gifts of encouragement, the gifts of administration. There's certain people that are just given gifts at birth. Every single person is born with a particular gift. And whether you're a Christian or not a Christian, you have been given gifts. And these are called the gifts of the Father. The middle column there, as you can see, that there's a different word. These are the gifts of the Holy Spirit. And these, we believe, are received at the baptism of the Holy Spirit. These are 1 Corinthians 12. So go read 1 Corinthians 12. Maybe as part of the group is to look at the difference between Romans 12, 1 Corinthians 12. And then the last passage there is Ephesians 4. These are the gifts that Jesus gave us. And these are given to the church. So Ephesians 4 talks about, and Jesus gives the gifts to the church, the apostles, prophets, pastors, teachers, and evangelists. Those are the gifts Jesus gives to the church. What's interesting about this is that all three of God, in terms of the Trinity, all three of them are equally generous. So what's the difference between charismatic and Pentecostal? Really, it's down to experience and a bit of theology. So generally speaking, Pentecostals hold essentially to that there's three different, so gifts of the Father, gifts of the Holy Spirit, gifts of Jesus are different gifts They're not all lumped as one. And there's some other theological things that we hold to. But large is that there's this baptism of the Holy Spirit. There's a second encounter, a second experience. And that's really what we hold to. Charismatic, or people who call themselves charismatic, typically come out of more traditional churches, and they have this encounter with the Holy Spirit, and so a lot of the expression looks the same, but they will stay within their church tradition. So you can have charismatic Catholics, or charismatic Anglicans, or charismatic Baptists, or Methodist, whatever, but they stay within their congregation or their denomination, but yet they've had this experience with the Holy Spirit. And largely, speaking in tongues or the gifts of the Spirit in 1 Corinthians 12, that's what's demonstrated. Pentecostalism really holds itself to around about 1904, 1905. Azusa Street revival in America would be the start of what they would call the Pentecostal church. Now, in 1970, there were 58 million people who said they were Pentecostals. They say in 2020, there were 638 million. So nearly 600 million people would call themselves Pentecostals in the last 50 odd years. It's the largest, fastest growing sort of aspect of the church globally, and largely within the global south. So we're part of an incredible, massive thing that God's doing. So our little church in Prestatyn is part of a massive global family who believe that we have a second experience, and that largely it's an empowerment for mission. So how can I be baptized with the Holy Spirit? I think this is quite easy. This is from Luke. Ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you'll find. Knock and the door will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives. The one who seeks finds. And to the one who knocks, the door will be opened. Which of you fathers, if your son asks for a fish, will give him a snake instead? Or if he asks for an egg, will give him a scorpion? If you then, though you are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give the Holy Spirit to those who ask him? Now, if you've done Alpha, we have a session, we have 3 or 4 sessions on the Holy Spirit. And I'd encourage you to pray a simple prayer. Just if you can do it at home, you can do it in your group, but really just to have a posture of openness and receiving. So I would say, as a Pentecostal, we would say you have to believe in Jesus, fundamentally, that his death, burial, and resurrection is the only way for salvation, which is the whole of last week's session. If you subscribe to that, then to go, we want to have a second experience, a second encounter, and really a posture of receiving. So put your hands out, and maybe at the end you can pray for each other. And just pray this prayer: Come, Holy Spirit. Come, Holy Spirit. And then be open to how God encounters with you. You might cry, you might laugh, you might start to speak or feel like there's a language that you have no idea what it means. You might start to have thoughts or pictures or whatever. There might be something different may come up. So what will happen? I love this. First of all, Jesus will become more real. That's part of the fruit. The Bible reading and prayer will become more meaningful. Worship and fellowship will take on a new dimension. Witnessing will be with power, because that's what God promised. And then in the New Testament, the people who received the baptism of the Holy Spirit received spiritual gifts. They were speaking in tongues, prophecy as they were baptized, and many other things. And there was something noticeable about it. So if you read all the accounts, pretty much every account where, in Acts especially, where it talks about people received the Holy Spirit, something happened. A lot of times people spoke in tongues, which we would define as, often we call it a heavenly language. And sometimes you don't know what to pray, and you pray in tongues, and often we believe the Holy Spirit is praying through us. Or you might just get an encouragement, or God might give you discernment. If you read 1 Corinthians 12, and any one of those gifts may come. Actually, the gifts are a manifestation of the Holy Spirit in your life. Maybe that's a better way of describing it. Because I've been on mission trips, and God's used me in different ways, on different occasions, but they would all be classed as gifts of the Holy Spirit at that time. So it is slightly different, but let's be open to what God's doing, and I think have a hunger for that. Like, God, I want to be filled with your Spirit. I want to be a witness. I want to know Jesus more. I want to, when I read my Bible, I want there to be more revelation. I want to have a desire, deeper desire to pray. I want to have a deeper desire for community and all those things. And that's what God does in our lives. And then I love this, Acts chapter 1, verse 8, empowerment for mission. You'll receive power when the Holy Spirit comes when you to be witnesses. First in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. So wherever you are to be a witness. And then be open to God using you wherever you go. But my closing statement, one of my favorite authors, Christopher Wright, says, it is not so much the case that God has a mission for his church in the world, as that God has a church for his mission in the world. Mission was not made for the church was made for mission, God's mission. And we believe strongly that we are empowered to be a part of God's mission. And I don't know about you, I need all the help I can get. So maybe you can, around this might be, have a load of questions. I will see if I can find some resources to steer people to. But maybe if there are any questions that you can't answer in a group, maybe send an email to me and I'll try to give you some help. So maybe go through those Romans 12, the giftings in Romans 12, the giftings in 1 Corinthians 12. Have a look and see the differences. And then maybe to pray for each other and just to pray. And you can pray a simple prayer, come Holy Spirit, and believe that God will, and the Holy Spirit will come, and you will be empowered